934 Barretto Street was built in 1912 for $40,000. In 1968, it was sold at a court auction for $100. The buyers were two brothers, Gerald and Melvin Weintraub. Under a new city program, the Municipal Loan Program, the Weintraubs purchased 21 properties in the South Bronx and received over $15 million in renovation loans from the city.
It was an excellent program. It was a good idea. The city of New York was actually doing something. It was their money and they were getting help from HUD, but really it was the city putting up a very good program for developers to develop neighborhoods and bring them back, particularly in the fine buildings that were in this neighborhood. I was very optimistic.
There was reason to be optimistic in the sense that anything that looked toward rehabilitation offered promise. Prior to that time, the entire emphasis was on construction of new buildings. That's not only expensive, there's some very negative social aspects to those kinds of, that kind of housing. And so there was reason for optimism. That the optimism was not justified is another issue.
Buddy Strickland, who was a construction worker on the rehab, was hired as the super of 934. In May 1969, he moved into the building with his two sons and his wife, Mildred. Right at the first, what was the building like?
It was beautiful. It was a dream come true. The building was a new building, new apartments, new appliance, and everything else. It was beautiful.
How long did that last?
From 68 to probably 72. So the city came in at that time and reclaimed the building for non-payment of taxes from the landlord.
What our findings were that this rehabilitation program, as well motivated as it might be, was a total failure. That is to say, sums of money were being invested into buildings, only to find that within 6 months or a year, they were back to where they were before.
Of the 21 buildings rehabbed by the Weintraubs, only 4 are still standing. Some were abandoned immediately after renovation. In 1972, the city foreclosed on all the properties for non-payment of real estate taxes. A year and a half later, the Weintraubs sued the city, contesting the foreclosure. They regained title to the buildings, but refused to accept responsibility for operating them. The city wrote to you saying, pay your rent for Weintraubs.
Right, they wrote each and every tenant here, stating pay you, as of November 1st, pay all rent to Borsell Realty, who was Weintraub, the landlord, because they would no longer be responsible for the building.
The city would no longer?
The city would no longer, HPD would no longer be responsible for the building.
Did you think that was good or bad?
I thought at that point it was good. I wanted anyone to manage the building but the city. The city had been lousy here.
So you figured with Weintraub again, you would?
Yes, we thought we'd be able to survive with him. We knew we would once he got back into the building, but that was impossible also. We found that out later after calling him. He flatly refused. He said, no, I do not want that building. That's the city's responsibility. So we called the city, and also the tenant sent rent to Weintraub, and he refused to accept it. He would send it back. And we called the city, asking them for help then for oil or something. They said no, so we was just, we was a building that was caught in the middle of the city and the landlord's fight or whatever was going on with them, and we was caught in the middle of it. And this was dead in the winter of 1975, but with no heat, no hot water, nothing. You was trapped in the city of New York in 1975. When you looked out there, from the concourse all over Harlem, anywhere you wanted to go to, the same thing, the decay, the crime, the drugs, all this was going on. It wasn't just here in the South Bronx. But I thought of running to Queens, I thought of running here, and I thought of running there. And then I said, you know, why should I run? Somebody got to take a stand and try to help, you know, try to work and save what we have here, because it was a beautiful building. It was recently renovated in 1968 through the municipal loan. So I stayed.
I think that 934 will always be unique in many respects in the alternative management programs because of two things. One was the extraordinary leadership that Mildred brought and a very dedicated group of tenants pursuing tenant management. And secondly, its location. Being right there in the heart of the desert in the South Bronx, I think really served to prove to me, and I think in turn to many others, that the theory that you had to have a whole group of buildings in order to have a neighborhood that was worth paying attention to or investing in was not really true, and that if you had a group of tenants willing to fight it out to stay in a building, support a building, keep a building alive, and use that building as a building block for the neighborhood, that you could do that as a viable strategy. And I think that they really showed that to me. So 934 became a model for tenant management in many respects, but most importantly that that was the place, that a building was the proper place to start in an attempt to rebuild a neighborhood.
Well, that's when we started doing the work ourselves because there was no rent money here for repairs. And at that point, Buddy and the other tenants here, their husbands, started going to abandoned buildings, which is illegal. We went and started taking different things we needed here.
How'd you get, like, major appliances, refrigerators, stoves?
Same place we got the other thing, out of abandoned buildings. Bathtubs. We had some apartments here had no bathtubs, no toilets, from the junkies and all. They'd taken different things. So I remember one time Buddy and Steve was taking a bathtub out of an abandoned building, and the police caught them. And Buddy and they told him it was illegal. Buddy was trying to explain to them what we was using these appliances for. And that's when they let him go. Yeah, it was funny.
How long did it take to get this whole building back together?
No, God, we're still working on it. We had an interview done through the Post and also through the Channel 2 News, stating that we was about to buy this building, and it was something new for $250 per unit. And after then, we were speaking with St. George and everyone getting it together, and I get a call one day from St. George, the commissioner, the assistant commissioner stating, Mildred, look, we can't sell you the building, and I'm sorry to tell you, but the landlord owns it, but don't worry, we'll work something out. We'll try to get it cleared up.
It became known, and none of us had known up until that point, that the former owner, Weintraub, had filed a series of actions in court claiming that the ownership of the building was still his. That was an extremely disappointing thing for us because HPD was pressing very hard to show that these programs were going to result in sales of buildings to low-income tenant cooperatives. And it was a very major setback for us and obviously very upsetting for Mildred as well.
When 934 was one of the few surviving buildings in the neighborhood, the determination of the tenants was strong. Now, surrounded by new federally subsidized rehabs, 934 was beginning to feel like a slum. The tenants lost hope in ever owning it, and many moved. The city finally won title to the building, but it was too late. Cooperation was replaced by tension.
It's the people in the tenants association that's supposed to control it. You're not controlling it.
Optimism with frustration.
I'm willing to be your manager. I'm willing to be your president, vice president, whatever office you want to select me as, okay? So I'm leaving.
And frustration with fear. In the fall of 1981, an elderly tenant was robbed and murdered in the building.
And like, he was a good guy. He always paid his rent on time, never bothered nobody. He went to work, came home. Anytime he saw you doing something, he helped you do it. He didn't speak no English that much because a lot of time I had to get people to translate. You know, like he come down to pay the rent or something like that. I had to get people to translate what he's saying. You know, he needs something. You know, and as far as I can see, I think it was maybe they was waiting for him on this lane. He was a nice dude, real nice, too nice for something like this to happen to him.
Shortly after that, Mildred suffered a stroke, her second. For her, it was too much.
I had a meeting with the tenants to discuss my leaving the building and resigning as manager. Yes. We had an emergency meeting last night.
How did the tenants react?
I don't know. They was all upset. You can imagine.
I'm sure they asked you what's going to happen. Who's going to manage it now?
Okay, what I told them is I didn't know what would happen here at the building, but I would go have a meeting with Mr. Smith. I also called him yesterday. I let him know I was moving today. And I let him know, I have a meeting for the 13th, Friday the 13th, 2 weeks from now. So I explained that to the tenants, and legally I'm still responsible until the 13th. I turn my books over. What I explained to them that was my sister, Mrs. Rose, she did not want to be manager, but she would accept rent, make deposit, and make repairs for the time being. But they had the 2 weeks to find someone, whether it be another tenant to be a tenant group, or whether it would be an organization like Banana Cali or something to manage, or maybe Father G, because I think he's very interested in the building. When I told them they had the auction, I told them what they was.
What do you think will happen?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what happened here. Well, I pray everything be good and keep going.
How long have you been here, Mildred? How long have you been here?
Since 1968, when the building was first renovated.
Put a lot of work into it.
Right. A lot of work.
Would the building survive if Mildred left?
No, it won't hang on at all.
What do you think would happen to it?
It just, the people will just eventually, drug people will get into it on a major way, and a fire will happen, and people get scared, a killing here, a killing there, and that's it. Everybody runs. They run to me. Please, could I get into your buildings? Please, could you find me a place? That's what will happen.
Is everybody agreed that the management will stay in the building? We will not, at this point, look outside the building for the management. Does everybody agree to that?
Yeah.
Well, the 12 tenants that was at the meeting, that's the agreement we came to. We picked a manager and a president, and I was elected for both posts. The vice president was Thomas here in the apartment 4A. The secretary was Nettie.
She's vice president?
Second vice president.
Second secretary.
Well, you still secretary, the second secretary. There's still a lot you have to know.
You should take 5 or 6 months and get this building under control, all right? With some of the dispossesses, try and get the people involved.
You know, we have to put that, everybody wants this fix and this fix and this fix, but they have to go by the bylaws. Otherwise, then that we're gonna
I think ultimately that neighborhood will survive and be rebuilt almost no matter what happens to 934 Barretto Street. I think the important thing to remember is that in much the same way that Pearl Harbor was bombed, it became a symbol of something, yet the war was won. And I view 934 Barretto Street as a symbol that inspired many other tenants and the city's government as well to respond in a positive way to tenant management. And as a symbol, they made others, it made it possible for other people to follow in their footsteps. So in a way, no matter what happens at 934 Barretto Street, it has taken on a life bigger than its own, and they've made a very important contribution.